is the part of a synthesizer that truly defines its sound? The thing that gives it its unique character and identity. Very often, more than anything else, it's the filter. And this is especially true with analog or analog-style instruments. While analog oscillators often sound pretty similar to each other, analog filters can have a wide diversity of sonic characteristics depending on the type of circuit, how it overdrives, how it responds to resonance, etc. There's a reason that the filters used in the Mini Moog or the MS-20 have become almost as famous as the instruments themselves. And all of this is certainly true of Buchla synthesizers as well. But the magic of Buchla filters doesn't just come from the sound of the filter itself, it comes from Buchla's primary innovation to combine the filter and the VCA into a single component, giving you control over both the tone and the amplitude of the sound from a single knob. This mimics the interaction between tone and amplitude found in real-world acoustic instruments and gives Buchla instruments a strikingly organic, natural sound. This is Buchla's low-pass gate, and it's the part of the tip-top audio Buchla system that we'll be focusing on today. The version that comes with the 200 series of modules is the 292 quad low-pass gate. First, we'll take a tour of its features and technical aspects that I find interesting, and then we'll hear an example patch of how it fits into the wider system. Hi, my name is Tim, I go by Voice from the Machine, and if you enjoy today's episode, please consider subscribing. I am doing my best to put out about one video a month, and I am putting as much time and care into each one as I possibly can. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get started. The tour of features will actually be very brief today, since it's pretty easy to tell what's going on with the 292 at a glance. As I said, a low-pass gate combines the functions of a low-pass filter and a voltage-controlled amplifier, and the 292 gives you 4 of them. 4 inputs along the bottom of the module, 4 outputs along the top, 4 CV inputs along the side, and 4 knobs to control the cutoff placed diagonally down the center. All of this arranged into a very satisfying and geometrically pleasing grid. Plug in a control voltage and the knob becomes an offset. It sets the floor, so to speak, of the filtering or amplification. Above each input is a switch that sets the mode of the low-pass gate. Flip it up into low-pass mode and it acts like a low-pass filter. Flip it down into gate mode and it acts like a VCA. Flip it to the center into combo mode and it acts like a filter and a VCA combined into one. It's combo mode that has that characteristically natural or acoustic sound that the low-pass gate is known for. But what is it about the low-pass gate that sounds so natural? In general, when acoustic instruments are played louder and softer, they don't just go up and down in volume. The tone of the sound changes as well. An electronic speaker cone is able to perfectly reproduce the same sound wave at different volumes. But in the natural world, vibrating bodies like the strings of a piano can't do this. As more energy is applied, the strings stretch and deform, creating more complex wave shapes with a brighter tone. You'll find this relationship between timbre and loudness in every acoustic instrument, regardless of how the sound is created. Notice that when I sweep the knob in gate mode, which doesn't affect the tone of the sound, it sounds like someone riding the faders on a mixer. It's a very distinctive sound found only in the world of recorded, electronically reproduced music. Combo mode gently rolls off the upper harmonics as the sound fades, in a way that's comfortable and familiar to our ears. The natural sound of the low-pass gate is most commonly associated with percussion sounds, and it's true. The Buchla Bongos are iconic for a reason. Put almost any sound through a low-pass gate, shorten the decay time, and suddenly you've got another hippie Buchla drum circle. The sound is startling, uncanny, and still catches me off guard every time I hear it. One of the things that's so nice about having the VCA and filter combined into one is that this magical sound is available all the time with the single flip of a switch. Trying to avoid it is like going halfway down a playground slide and then trying to climb out the top instead of going out the bottom. Of course, it's impossible to talk about Buchla Bongos without mentioning another extremely well-known feature of the traditional low-pass gate, its use of resistive opto-isolators, commonly referred to as Vactrols. Vactrols themselves have established a kind of mystique around them, much like Buchla synthesizers in general. A Vactrol is a combination of an LED and a light-dependent resistor, and in a low-pass gate, it's the part of the circuit that opens and closes in response to control voltage. Vactrols are an idiosyncratic and outdated technology that have a pretty glaring flaw, which can actually be exploited for musical purposes. Here's the standard way to patch a low-pass gate, as if it were a normal filter or VCA. You've got an oscillator going into the input, the output going into a mixer, and an envelope, in this case a function from the quad function generator, heading into the CV input. With the knob set to minimum, the envelope of the sound is controlled by the function generator, and we can adjust the attack and decay times to whatever we want. But what if instead of an envelope, you plugged in just a tiny click or transient sound, like the raw gate signal from the programmable pulsar. If this were a normal VCA or filter, you'd hear nothing, or just a tiny clicking sound. But the low-pass gate gives this pleasant pinging sound instead. This happens because Vactrols are slow to respond to sudden changes in control voltage. The decay you hear is the Vactrol slowly closing after it's been opened. This technique is appropriately called pinging. This is what's important to understand about pinging. The low-pass gate doesn't make any sound on its own, but with the addition of pinging, it essentially combines the functions of a filter, a VCA, and an envelope generator all into one. So what do I mean when I say Vactrols are idiosyncratic? Well, for one thing, they have very wide tolerances, meaning each one behaves a little differently. In theory, this means each 292 is one of a kind. For another thing, they contain cadmium, which causes cancer, and so they've been banned in the European Union. This forced Tip Top Audio to release a second version of the 292 without Vactrols. It also means this technology will almost certainly be phased out more and more as time goes on. It's funny, but at first I didn't really care about Vactrols at all until the ban introduced this sense of scarcity, like there's suddenly this dying technology that you better get your hands on now before they're gone for good. But I'm not really certain how essential Vactrols are to the sound of the low-pass gate. I don't have the version of the 292 that comes without Vactrols, so I can't directly compare them myself. I do know you can't ping it. Now I know some of you may hate me for this, but to my ears, I really don't hear anything that special about the particular decay envelope you get from pinging. A separate envelope generator like Maths can get you similarly pingy sounds and also gives you more control. But I also understand that for many, this built-in ability to generate envelopes is basically a defining feature of the low-pass gate, to the point where some modern incarnations feature a strike input dedicated just to pinging. Fortunately, modules like Rabbit Elephant's Natural Gate have been able to replicate this behavior without the use of Vactrols. So while Vactrols might be going away, pinging is not going anywhere. Personally, I think there's something really beautiful about the sound of combo mode that goes beyond pinging, and I think it has to do with the unique response curve of the filter. Listen again to how subtle and gradual the filtering is as you sweep the knob. Compare this to low-pass mode, where the filtering is steeper and more aggressive. To me, low-pass mode has more of that stereotypical synthesizer sound to it, while combo mode is less artificial. But why do these two modes sound so different? I did a little digging into exactly what kind of filter the low-pass gate uses, and it was very validating to learn that what I thought I was hearing was actually pretty well explained by what's happening behind the scenes. Now, I'm not an expert, and I'll put a link in the description to a video that explains this all in more detail, but it turns out the low-pass gate in the 292 isn't just a VCA and a filter wired together in series. Overall, the circuit is one big Salin key filter that switches the components of the filter around depending on what mode you're in. Fun fact, in gate mode, it's still technically filtering the sound, but it's only filtering frequencies so high they're out of the range of human hearing. In combo mode, it essentially acts like a passive RC filter, and this gives it a different frequency response than it does in low-pass mode. The important takeaway is that it's very unusual to have such a gentle frequency response in a synthesizer filter. You'd more commonly hear this in something like an equalizer, which is trying to be as transparent as possible. I really think this is what gives the low-pass gate such a natural sound, since it doesn't have any of that immediately identifiable twang that you get with a typical synthesizer filter. Of course, even low-pass mode in the 292 is pretty gentle, which might become a problem if you need filtering that's a little more aggressive. Luckily, there's ways around that with some creative patching. If you patch the output of the first low-pass gate into the input of the second low-pass gate, and then control them both with the same modulation source, the filter cutoff becomes steeper. Do this again by patching the second into the third, and then the third into the fourth, and we finally end up with something that sounds more like a Moog than a Buchla. We can even go one step further and make our 292 into a resonant low-pass filter by using a feedback patch. First, instead of patching the oscillator straight into the input of the first low-pass gate, we're going to patch it into one of the inputs on the 257 voltage processor. This will allow it to be mixed with a second signal. Next, we're going to mult the output of the last low-pass gate so that it's going both to the final mixer so we can hear it, and back to another input of the 257 voltage processor. The 257 will allow us to invert this signal and then mix it with the original signal from the oscillator. The more of this signal we add, the more the filter starts to resonate. These are not sounds you'd expect to hear from a Buchla. Just for fun, let's add a sub-oscillator to really complete the effect. And now our Mini Moog cosplay is complete. And for those of you familiar with resonant filters, yes, it can self-oscillate, which means yes, you can ping it, which is both hilarious and extremely confusing. But now it's time to crawl back out of the rabbit hole, see the sunshine, touch some grass, and make a patch. Forgive me if I don't feature Buchla Bongos in our example performance patch today, but I already feel like I've heard enough Buchla Bongos in this video to last a lifetime. My idea for this patch was to explore another use for the low-pass gate, which is to create a sense of space and distance. Having both the tone and amplitude of the sound changing together can also give the impression that the sound is moving closer or further away. My idea was to create a sort of sound environment that the listener is moving through. I'll be honest, this patch was a bit of a struggle for me, but I think it's a good example of the kind of problem solving you have to do when creating a performance on an analog modular synth. I started with this sort of industrial drone from the complex oscillator, where the modulation index is being controlled by the sequential voltage source. I added one of the dual oscillators to make this sound a little fuller. Both of these are running through the first two low-pass gates. Next, I connected a slow-moving function generator to the CV inputs of both low-pass gates. The idea was to have the sound gradually fade in and out with a decent amount of silence in between, but when I first plugged in the function generator, I didn't get at all what I wanted. The first problem I had is that the function generator was cycling too quickly. Fortunately, both the rise and fall times can be made longer with a DC offset from the voltage processor. I'll be talking more about the features of the quad function generator in my next video. The second problem I had was that I wanted more silence between each cycle. So I used the upper half of the voltage processor to attenuate the envelope coming from the function generator. Even for an effect as simple as this one, it took a long time to tune each of these elements to get exactly the effect I was going for. Finally, it's sounding about like I'd hoped. I'm not exactly sure what the ambiance is that I'm going for, but whatever it is, I'm nailing it. Now it's time to add more to our sonic environment, but this will be a little challenging since we've already used 3 out of 4 oscillators, one being the modulation oscillator for our main sound, and we've already used both halves of the voltage processor as well. This is where it really starts to become challenging doing this all in one take without any overdubs. My first instinct was to bring in white noise from the source of uncertainty, although I wasn't really sure what to do with it at first. Next, I brought in the second of the dual oscillators and modified its wave shape with a quantized random voltage, also from the source of uncertainty. Next, I tried multing the random voltage to the CV input of the low-pass gate that the noise was running through, and while this did give the noise something to do, I didn't really love where this was going. Part of the problem is that random voltages in a patch are a little distracting to me if they're too obvious. So I decided to go for another method I tried in the past, which is to use a cycling function generator run through a sample and hold, creating stepped voltages that are more cycling in nature rather than completely random. I used a variation of this same sample and hold signal on the white noise and was finally satisfied. I love it. It's like you're walking in big slow circles around a giant alien fax room. Playing with the panning really completes the effect. And that is all for today's video. I didn't expect this one to be so long, but every time I get to writing about these modules, there turns out to be so much more to explore than I thought. Next time we'll be talking about the 281 quad function generator, so I hope to see you there. Thank you so much again for watching, and have a lovely evening.